Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for yet another unscripted vlog. Once again, this is not the traditional format for the show, but as there are relevant current events that need to be discussed of an educational nature, I figured it was pertinent to get in front of the camera and talk about these things. So let's get into it. And again, I'm going to be referring to my phone occasionally for some notes here, as this is unscripted. So today there's been a lot of buzz about this holiday, Juneteenth, and it is something that I know I never learned about when I was in school, and I'm certainly quite frustrated at that fact. I mean, yes, in school, sure, we learned about the Civil War. Sure, we learned about Abraham Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation to bring slavery to an end. Sure, we learned later on, of course, that it didn't just magically happen overnight. We learned about how Brown versus Board of Ed overruled Plessy versus Ferguson to end segregation in schools, but that segregation in schools also hasn't really completely come to an end even today in the year 2020. And sure, you could argue that things on some level are better in the United States of America in terms of fighting against racism and hate than they were decades ago, but obviously there's still a ways to go, as we all know, given not just the protests that happened a couple weeks ago, but I mean all sorts of events in recent history. Frankly, for me, after learning more about what Juneteenth is all about, I would happily join the voices out there like Senator Kamala Harris who are calling for it to be recognized as a federal holiday, because it's far more deserving of that than something, I would say, than Columbus Day. And the more that you learn about Christopher Columbus, frankly, the less there is to like. So what is Juneteenth? Well, the name of that holiday doesn't lend itself very well to informing people about what it's all about. But if you think about it, neither does the 4th of July, but a lot of people do refer to that also as Independence Day, and that is much more of a clue as to what that's about. So what is Juneteenth? Well, in this PBS article that I'm going to refer you all to in the description below, written by Henry Louis Gates Jr., who is the director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research and Alphonse Fletcher University professor at Harvard University, the first Juneteenth was to commemorate the anniversary of when Major General Gordon Granger, or Granger, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which way it should be pronounced, issued the above order. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, which refers to the executive office being the White House, being President Abraham Lincoln, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So why is this important? Well, it's another piece of history to show us that obviously things don't just magically happen overnight. Just because President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, it didn't just instantly end slavery. And this issue, which was executed by the Major General, was issued after President Lincoln was assassinated. So it was another measure taken in that direction to enforce what the Emancipation Proclamation sought to execute. And as Henry Louis Gates Jr. writes here, but Granger, or Granger, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, wasn't just a few months late. The Emancipation Proclamation itself, ending slavery in the Confederacy, at least on paper, had taken effect 2.5 years before. And in the interim, close to 200,000 black men had enlisted in the fight. So, speaking to this, why isn't Juneteenth more commonly referred to as Emancipation Day, as calling it Emancipation Day would be a much bigger clue to everybody about what this holiday is all about? And that's because, as Henry Louis Gates Jr. writes in this article, there were several other contenders for a holiday that could have been called Emancipation Day but never really came about, or at least was never federally recognized by this country. There was, of course, September 22nd, 1862, when Lincoln issued that Emancipation Proclamation. There was New Year's Day, which is when the Emancipation Proclamation took effect in 1863. And there's just a slew of other dates here. June 31st, when the 13th Amendment was finally passed in Congress in 1865, abolishing the institution of slavery. There's December 6th, when the 13th Amendment was ratified. in that same year. But Juneteenth, or June 19th, is the strongest contender, and it's actually when a lot of people over the many years have observed this. So really thinking of this holiday as Emancipation Day might be better fitting, at least in terms of just helping, in the context of schools, helping kids learn about it and internalize what it's all about. So I really encourage everybody to go check out that PBS article, at least as a start, to learn about what Juneteenth is all about, as I am doing as well. That's in the description below. I also want to call everybody's attention to something else really important that became viral today, which is stophateforprofit.org, in which many different organizations have banded together, organizations like the ADL and Color for Change and Common Sense Media, Free Press, the NAACP, and Sleeping Giants. All of these organizations that have been combating hate and racism for decades have all come together in this campaign to ask all businesses, as it says here, to stand in solidarity with our most deeply held American values of freedom, equality, and justice, and not advertise on Facebook services in the month of July. #StopHateForProfit. This is in reaction to the social media giants' willingness to allow hate to continue to be promoted on their platform. As they say here, we know what Facebook did. They allowed incitement to violence against protesters fighting for racial justice in America in the wake of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and so many others. They named Breitbart a trusted news source and made the Daily Caller a fact checker. Despite both publications having records of working with known white nationalists, they've turned a blind eye to blatant voter suppression on their platform, and so on and so forth. And while other social media such as Twitter have stepped up in instituting genuine fact checkers or fact checking policy to combat this sort of thing, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook have not. So it's also just as important as it is to commemorate Juneteenth as it is to urge businesses that you support to also support stophateforprofit.org and decide to take their ads off of Facebook. Unfortunately, obviously, assembling for protesting peacefully is a very important way to make your voice heard, but we all know that money talks ultimately. And if enough businesses join this campaign to get off of Facebook in the next month of July, or even just right now, to pull their ads, maybe Facebook will finally listen and realize, hey, we need to do a better job about fact checking what's posted on our site and do a better job about combating hate. And of course, yes, it is a complicated issue given the First Amendment, but there's certainly way more that Facebook could be doing that the likes of Twitter and even YouTube to some extent have done. So, we all need to take part in urging Facebook to do the right thing here. So check out that PBS article below for more information on Juneteenth. Check out stophateforprofit.org for information about that and what you could do to help to urge businesses to pull their ads from Facebook in that campaign. And that's what I've got for you today, guys. And I know there's other videos I've been working on for the channel, and again, I know this is not the usual for Engage, but as it is important to education, this is an educational show, and so all of that sort of thing is also very important to boost the signal on. And even though, at least at this point in time, I think I just crossed 150 subscribers, so I know that's great, but I know my audience is not so massive at the time being, but it doesn't matter. I've always stood against hate and racism in any form as well as I can, so I want to do my part in boosting the signal for both of these things. So I encourage you all, go learn as much as you can about Juneteenth, and we'll see you next time.